Don't move, Mr. Whitfield. Please. Charles Whitfield stopped on his own driveway, with his briefcase in one hand and his car key fob in the other, his mind already 40 minutes ahead in a conference room downtown. The voice had come from somewhere near the boxwood hedge, small and urgent, and when he turned he found a girl of about 11 standing half-hidden in the morning shadow, wearing a yellow raincoat, though there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Naomi. He knew her, Della's daughter, the housekeeper's girl, the one who sometimes did her homework at the kitchen island, while her mother folded towels. He had never had a real conversation with her. He wasn't sure he'd ever learned more than her name. Aren't you supposed to be at school? Not yet. Please, sir, don't go to the car. Her hand found his sleeve and held on, with a grip that didn't match her size. Don't let Eugene see you walking funny. Just walk normal. But don't get in. Charles glanced toward the gate. Eugene, or the man, who was supposed to be Eugene, stood beside the town car, with the rear door already open, scrolling his phone the way drivers always did, when they'd been waiting a few minutes too long. Nothing about the scene announced itself as wrong. The gravel was raked. The car was black and clean and idling exactly the way it always idled. Sweetheart, I have a board meeting in 40 minutes, Charles said, keeping his voice gentle. Whatever this is, can it wait until tonight? She didn't let go. Her eyes weren't a child's eyes anymore. They had the flat, sleepless look of someone who had rehearsed this moment 100 times overnight and was terrified she'd still get it wrong. If you get in that car, she whispered, I don't think you're coming home. I heard them say your name on the porch last night. I heard them say half already, half when it's finished. Something cold moved down the back of Charles Whitfield's neck, and he made himself ignore it the way he ignored most physical sensations before 9 in the morning. He was a man who had built a 400-truck freight company out of a single leased rig and a line of credit nobody believed in. He did not reroute his morning because of a child's nightmare, but he looked at the driver again. Really looked. His actual driver, Otis Marsh, had worn a faded green baseball cap every day for 6 years, a gift from his late brother, a Marine, who died before Otis could ever properly thank him for it. Otis never showed up, without it, rain or sun, because he said taking it off felt like losing the conversation he never got to finish. The man at the gate was bareheaded. How do you know it was about me? Charles asked quietly, eyes still on the gate, and not someone else. Because they said Whitfield 3 times, Naomi said. And they said your wife already paid the first half. They said the policy pays double if it looks like an accident. Charles's chest went still in the particular way it always did right before very bad financial news in a meeting, the moment of total quiet before the body decides whether to keep functioning. Walk with me, he said. Slow. Around the side. Don't look back at the gate. They went together along the flagstone path, past the koi pond his late mother had insisted on, past the bench, where his wife liked her coffee in good weather, and around behind the row of holly that screened the side of the house from the driveway. When they were hidden, Charles knelt so his eyes were level with the girls. Tell me everything. Slow. Don't skip anything. Naomi took a breath that shook on the way in, but came out steady. I was supposed to be asleep. I came down for my library book, and the kitchen light was off, but the porch door was open a little, and I heard my mom's radio going in the laundry room, so she didn't hear it, but I did. There was a man out there I didn't know, and Mrs. Whitfield. Charles kept his face still by force of will alone. She said everything's set for the morning. She said the real driver got sent home for the week and wouldn't even know to check. She said you never look up from your phone until you're already in the car, so you wouldn't notice the face was different. Naomi's eyes filled with something far older than 11. And then she said, after today, I finally get my life back. For a long moment Charles Whitfield said nothing. He crouched behind the holly, with one hand against the cold brick of his own house, and felt the floor of his life quietly give way beneath him. Do you have anything else? He asked. Anything you can show me? Naomi hesitated, then reached into the deep pocket of her raincoat and pulled out something small and brass-colored, scuffed at the edges, an old pocket recorder shaped like a thick antique watch, the kind sold at flea markets as a novelty. It was my granddaddy's. He used to record himself singing, so he could hear if he was doing it right. My mom let me keep it after he passed. I didn't know what else to do, so I pressed the button and held it by the door crack. Charles took it the way a man takes something already broken, careful not to be the one who finishes breaking it. The little screen showed a single saved file, 9 minutes, 58 seconds. He pressed play. At first there was only the clink of ice in a glass, then his wife's voice, warm, unhurried, the same voice she used at dinner parties when she wanted a room to relax. He has to walk to that car on his own. If anything looks forced, the police pull the thread in a day. He gets in because he trusts it. A man's voice, lower, patient, reciting something he'd clearly said before. He will. He's a 740 man. Never varies. Phone up, head down, into the car. The new driver knows the Ashford Pike route. There's a bend past the old quarry where the guardrail's been out 2 years. Nobody questions a wet road out there. A pause. The soft sound of a glass being set down. And the policy clears? The man asked. 11 months in, Renata answered. Accidental death doubles it. The lawyers signed off in March. There's no other beneficiary. He made sure of that himself, the year he restructured everything for the merger. He never read past page 2 of his own paperwork. He never does. Charles closed his eyes. He remembered that signing. A Tuesday in Charlotte, a stack of merger documents 2 inches thick, a young associate flipping pages and murmuring standard, just initial here. He remembered being tired. He remembered not asking. After it's done, his wife continued, we don't see each other for a year, minimum. No calls. No texts. I grieve like a wife is supposed to grieve. You disappear back to wherever you came from until it's safe. Charles stopped the recording. He didn't need the rest. Whatever life he had woken up inside, that morning, it had ended sometime in the night, while he slept 20 feet above that porch conversation. If you've ever had the floor of your own life shift like that in a single sentence, you already know this feeling doesn't ask permission. Stay with us for what happens next, and if you'd like more mornings like this one to find you, you already know where the subscribe button is. He looked at Naomi, who was watching him, with the exhausted patience of someone who had waited all night to be believed. Does your mother know you recorded this? No, sir. She had the radio on. I don't think she heard any of it. Good. I need you to keep it that way. Not because she did anything wrong, because the fewer people who know right now, the safer everyone stays, including her. Can you do that? Naomi nodded, and there was something in the set of her jaw that told Charles she understood exactly what he meant, the way children understand danger long, before they have words polished enough to explain it. He slid the little brass recorder into his jacket pocket, the way a man handles a piece of glass pulled from a wound, and stood, brushing the dust from his trousers. Through a gap in the holly, he could see the town car still waiting, the false driver no longer looking at his phone, his weight shifting foot to foot the way a man shifts when he's been told to expect something simple, and it's taking longer than promised. Charles took out his own phone and tapped a name from his favorites. Charles, you're going to be late for Hawkins. Dwight, I need something from you, and I need you to tell no one in the building. Not Patricia, not legal, no one. A pause on the line. Dwight Calloway had been his attorney for 22 years and had heard this exact register in Charles's voice exactly twice. Once during the antitrust fight in 2011, once the week Charles's father died. Talk to me, Dwight said. I need the complete history on my life insurance policy. Every amendment in the last 3 years, every signature, every change to the beneficiary language. I need it inside the hour. Charles, what is happening? Charles looked down at Naomi, who looked steadily back up at him. Something I should have caught a long time ago, he said. Dwight didn't waste time on more questions. Stay exactly where you are, he said, and hung up. Charles stood behind the holly, with the silent phone in his hand, and felt his own pulse in his fingertips, a sensation he associated with hostile takeovers and his father's funeral, not with his own front yard at 7:42 in the morning. His phone lit up. Renata. He almost let it ring out, but he understood, in the same distant, clinical way he'd understood the recording, that silence would tell her something was wrong, before he was ready for her to know it. Charles, Where on earth are you? Eugene's been at the gate for 10 minutes. I left a folder in the study, he said, and was faintly amazed at how ordinary his own voice sounded. The Hawkins projections. I'll be right out. Do you want me to grab it? No. Stay where you are. 2 minutes. Hurry, darling. You know how the Beltway gets. He ended the call and crouched again, level with Naomi. I need to see her, he said. Just once, with my own eyes, before I do anything else. Do you understand why? The girl thought about it, with the seriousness of a much older person weighing a hard question honestly. Because if you don't look, she said, you might still tell yourself she didn't really mean it. Charles studied her for a long moment. An 11-year-old in a yellow raincoat had just named the exact shape of his hope in fewer words than he could have managed himself. Yes, he said, exactly that. They moved along the back of the house, ducking beneath the kitchen windows, until they reached the corner of the east wing, where a screen of climbing wisteria gave a clear view of the side terrace. Renata was there. She was not alone. The man across the wrought iron table from her was lean, sandy-haired, somewhere in his early 40s, dressed like he belonged on a golf course rather than a stranger's terrace at 7:45 in the morning. His hand rested near hers on the table, not touching, but close enough that the closeness was the point. Renata was wearing the pale green dress Charles had bought her in Savannah, the one she'd said she would save for something special. By tonight, she said, just loud enough to carry on the still morning air. This is finally over. The man lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to the inside of her wrist. We begin, he said. Charles did not feel rage. He did not feel grief. He felt something closer to watching a photograph of his own life catch fire slowly, from one corner, the flame moving inward at its own unhurried pace. He turned away from the wisteria. Naomi had seen it too, and her small face had gone very still and very quiet, the way children go quiet when they understand, for the first time, that adults can be exactly as dangerous as anything in a story. Come with me, Charles said. In the laundry room, a part of his own house, he realized, with a kind of distant amusement, he had never actually stood inside in 11 years of living there. Charles called Otis. Mr. Whitfield? Everything all right. I figured the dates got switched on me. Front office texted last week saying my SUV needed inspection and they'd send a relief driver for the week. Didn't think nothing of it. Otis, is your truck actually in the shop? A pause. No, sir. Sitting in my driveway right now, plain as day. Charles closed his eyes. The lie had been planted a full week ahead by someone with access to his dispatch system, his driver's number, and, worse, his trust. I need you to drive, over here, Charles said. Park 1 block down. Don't come to the gate. I'll call you in a few minutes. He ended the call and turned to find Naomi standing by the dryer, her back against the wall, watching him with an attention that made him feel, oddly, less alone than he had in years. I need you to do exactly what I tell you, he said. Go tell your mother your stomach hurts and you want to lie down. Nothing else. Don't say anything about this morning. If anyone at all, asks where I am, you haven't seen me since breakfast. Can you do that? Yes, sir. He knelt one more time. I level. What you did this morning is the bravest thing I've seen in a very long time. Whatever happens today, whatever you hear later, that doesn't change. You understand? Naomi nodded, solemn as a small judge, and walked out of the laundry room. Charles listened to her footsteps fade down the hall, tile, then hardwood, then nothing, and stood alone for a long minute in a room that had been part of his house for over a decade and had only become real to him in the last 10. He went to the study first, opened and closed a drawer he didn't need, set a small trail of evidence in his own movements the way a careful man leaves footprints on purpose. Then he walked to the front foyer, where Renata stood at the hall mirror, adjusting an earring. There you are, she said warmly. Find it. He held up a folder containing nothing but a quarterly forecast she'd already seen emailed 3 days earlier. Found it. Good. Go, you'll just make it. He crossed to her and kissed her cheek lightly, just below the ear, breathing in the perfume he'd bought her in 3 different bottles over 9 years. I love you, she said. He could not say it back. He gave her the small, private smile he had used 1,000 times, and turned for the door, and the not saying felt, for the first time in his married life, like the most honest thing he'd done that morning. The town car waited 30 feet down the drive. The false driver straightened the moment the front door opened, one hand already on the rear handle. Charles came down the steps at his usual pace, eyes on his phone, scrolling emails he wasn't reading, until he was 15 feet out, and then, without breaking stride, he angled 10 degrees off course, toward the small pedestrian gate at the side of the property. "Mr. Whitfield?" the driver said, uncertain. Charles lifted the phone to his ear, as if mid-call. "Yes, I'm walking out now." "No, meet me at the corner, the drive's blocked." He pushed through the pedestrian gate and didn't look back. The town car couldn't follow. No one had written a contingency for a man who simply walked past his own death. 2 blocks down, Otis's gray sedan idled at the curb exactly where he'd been told to wait. Charles got in the front seat, not the back. "Drive," he said, "anywhere that isn't downtown." Otis pulled away. 2 blocks later he asked, carefully, "Mr. Whitfield, you want to tell me what's going on?" "Last week's text about your inspection. Did you call to confirm it?" "No, sir." "Came through the right number, right format. Didn't think twice." "It wasn't real, Otis. Someone with access to my schedule, and your number built it on purpose. Someone's been planning something for at least a week. Possibly longer." Otis's knuckles whitened slightly on the wheel, but he didn't ask for more. He'd driven wealthy men long enough to know what kind of plans took a week of careful lying to assemble. "Where to?" he said quietly. "There's a diner on Pell Street. Park behind it. Dwight's meeting us there." Dwight Calloway was already at a corner booth, 2 coffees on the table, and a leather folder under one hand, dressed in the same gray suit he wore whether the meeting cost $10 or $10 million. He stood when Charles came in, and they shook hands the careful way of men who had known each other long enough to skip past the unnecessary parts. Charles told him everything. Naomi, the recording, the terrace, the dress from Savannah, the man's mouth against Renata's wrist, the false driver, Otis's manufactured text. He spoke for nearly 15 minutes without stopping. Dwight wrote nothing down and missed nothing. When Charles finished, Dwight opened the folder and laid 3 pages on the table. "Your policy," he said. "Original face value $2 million, taken out 14 years ago, standard for a man in your position then. First Amendment 6 years back, raised to $9 million after the IPO. Routine. I was in the room." He tapped the 3rd page. Second Amendment, 11 months ago, raised to $28 million. An accidental death rider was attached, doubles the payout under specific conditions. The beneficiary clause was simplified. Every contestable provision stripped out. Renata is sole beneficiary, no waiting period, no exclusions. Charles stared at his own signature at the bottom of the page, the familiar small loop at the end of Whitfield, and felt nothing about it, the way a man feels nothing looking at a photograph of a stranger wearing his face. "I don't remember signing this." "I expected that," Dwight said. "It was witnessed by a notary in a small office outside Richmond. He retired 4 months ago. Moved to Florida. Hasn't answered his phone in 2 weeks." "Renata was in Richmond 11 months ago," Charles said slowly. "For her sister's anniversary dinner. She came home with photographs. And according to the notary's log, you signed this the day before that dinner." "I checked your calendar from that week, Charles. You were in Singapore." The 2 men looked at each other across the cooling coffee. Somewhere near the counter, a spoon clinked against a cup, ordinary and indifferent to everything being said 6 feet away. "I want to know everything," Charles said. "Who he really is. How long this has been built. And I want to know before she does." Dwight closed the folder. "Already started. I called Marisol Pruitt before I left my driveway this morning. 15 years she's done this kind of work for me. Quiet, thorough, doesn't waste a single phone call." That afternoon, in a hotel room on the edge of the county, that Dwight had booked under a name that wasn't Charles's and paid for, with a card that wouldn't show up on any statement Renata could see, Charles sat on the end of the bed and looked at the carpet for a long time before he did anything else. His phone buzzed. "Marisol has a name. Calling in 5. When the call came through, the voice was low, unhurried, professional. "Mr. Whitfield, I'm Marisol Pruitt. I'll be brief, because we don't have much time to waste. The man on your terrace this morning is currently using the name Caleb Doyle. That's not the name he was born with. Go on. He was born Russell Cade, in Ohio, in 1979. Legally changed his name in 2008, the year after his first wife died. Her name was Dana Cade, 39, fell from a hiking trail outside Asheville. Ruled accidental. She carried a $2.6 million policy. He was sole beneficiary. Charles closed his eyes. In 2013, he was engaged to a woman in Denver, broke it off 6 months before the wedding, filed a restraining order against him 3 weeks later, granted. He left the state inside a month. Married again in 2016, a widow in Tampa, 51 years old, no children, considerable money. They were married 14 months. She died of what the fire department called an accidental gas leak. He wasn't home. The payout was $4.1 million. And now, Charles said quietly, he's here. With my wife. With a $28 million policy and a quarry road outside Ashford. That's what it looks like, yes. No one spoke for a moment. Then Charles asked the question he'd been holding since the terrace. Does Renata know any of it? His real name? The others? A pause on the line. I can't say with certainty, Marisol said. The trail is buried across 4 states, and a legal name change. The only reason I found it, as fast as I did, is that the same Richmond notary handled a property closing for him 2 years ago under his old name. Without that thread, this takes weeks, not hours. Then she's also a victim, Dwight said softly. She's also a participant, Charles said. Both things can be true. He rubbed a hand slowly across his face and felt, for the first time since the holly hedge, the cold composure he'd been running on all day begin to crack at the edges. What do we do? He said. 2 ways forward, Dwight said. We go to the police now. The recording, the policy history, the fabricated signature, the eyewitness, Doyle's pattern. It's enough to open a case tonight. Or we let him believe the plan is still alive. We let him walk toward it. We catch him not on intent, but on the act itself, in a way no lawyer can talk him out of. He's done this twice, and walked away both times, Charles said. Yes. Then we don't let him walk away a third. That evening, Otis drove Charles back, through the front gate at 6:45, the way he had 1,000 evenings before. Renata met him at the door in soft gray and cream, her hair down the way she wore it, when she wanted to look like she hadn't tried. Thank God, she said, taking both his hands. I've been out of my mind all day. What happened with the car? Someone impersonated the dispatch line. Different driver, no record of the change on file. I noticed and walked. Dwight thinks it might be one of those rings that target wealthy men's cars downtown. There's been a string of them. He watched her face as he said it, watched for the small release at the corner of her eyes that told him the lie had landed exactly where he'd built it to land. That's terrifying, she said. I'm so glad you noticed. So am I. She put her arms around him, and he held her the way he always had, and felt, for the first time in his marriage, the specific grief of embracing someone who had quietly decided he was worth more to her dead than alive. It was a grief, without sharp edges, slow, wide, and only now rising high enough to notice. They ate dinner by candlelight. She asked about Dwight, about the company's response, about his day, and he gave her just enough truth to sound honest, and not nearly enough to sound rehearsed. Afterwards, she fell asleep against his shoulder on the sofa in the garden room, and he sat very still, looking through the tall windows at the dark terrace where, that morning, she had decided exactly when he would die. At 11, after she'd gone up, Charles walked quietly to the small staff cottage behind the east hedge. A single porch light burned above the door. Della Foster opened it before he finished knocking and didn't look surprised to find her employer on her step near midnight. She's asleep, Della said. Said her stomach hurt all day. Barely touched dinner. May I see her? Naomi was curled under a thin blanket, shoes lined up neatly by the bed, a school notebook open on the chair, its pages full of careful pencil drawings, birds, mostly, and one of a yellow raincoat. Charles stood in the doorway a long moment. Then he turned to Della. I owe you the truth, he said quietly. Some tonight. The rest in a few days. Will you sit with me? He told her enough. Not Russell Cade's full history, not every detail of the recording, but enough that someone had built a plan against his life that morning, that her daughter had very likely saved it, and that the people behind the plan didn't yet know they had failed. Della listened without interrupting, her hands folded on the kitchen table. When he finished, she said only, "I knew something was sitting on her all week." She'd gone quiet, drawing the same bird over and over. I asked her Tuesday if something happened, and she said no. Her eyes were wet, but nothing fell. She was protecting me. She was, Charles said. Not because she didn't trust you. What do you need from me? Keep living exactly as you have been. Naomi stays close to the house until I say otherwise. There will be people watching the property. Quietly, you won't see them. In a few days, this will be over. And after, Della said. It wasn't quite a question. After, Charles said, we talk about what comes next. The next 2 days passed the way a held breath passes. Charles moved through his own house with the same faint, distracted calm he always carried, because every habit unchanged was a line of evidence in the story Renata believed she was reading, and any break in the pattern would be a thread she might pull. On the second night at dinner, he mentioned Ashford. I have to go out to the Quarry Road site Friday morning. Insurance adjuster wants to walk the old guardrail section before the county repairs it. I've put it off twice already. Renata took a slow sip of wine before answering. Is the company sending someone new? Otis is driving. I asked for him specifically. Dwight's vetted the route already. That's wise, she said, and smiled. And he smiled back, and underneath the candlelight 2 plans moved forward at once, and only one person at that table understood that both of them were aimed at the same morning. Friday came in clean and cold, the sky the color of pale slate. Otis pulled up at 7:45 in his own gray sedan, green cap on, left hand resting easy on the door handle. Charles came down the front steps at his ordinary pace and got in. They drove in silence for the first 10 minutes, out past the Beltway, and onto the county Tulane toward Ashford. They're behind us, Otis said eventually, eyes flicking to the mirror. Dark blue sedan, 2 men, picked us up at the Pell Street light. Marisol's people have had eyes on them since. Charles watched the trees blur gold along the shoulder and thought about Dana Cade, who had gone for a hike on an ordinary Saturday and never come down the trail. He thought about the widow in Tampa, asleep in her own house on what should have been an unremarkable night. He thought about Renata, probably at that moment in the garden room, with her tea, waiting for a phone call she believed would be the worst news of her life, and was instead going to be the end of her freedom. He did not feel rage. He had expected to. Instead, he felt something quieter, the particular stillness of watching a long sentence finally arrive at its period. The quarry road narrowed. The old guardrail gap appeared on the left exactly where the county record said it would. A car was already pulled into the turnout, a man leaning against it, with his face turned away, the same man from the gate. That morning, same wrong bare head, same easy posture of someone who believed the script was still running on schedule. There he is, Otis said. Keep driving. They passed. In the side mirror, Charles watched the man straighten, watched him climb into his own car. Behind them, the dark sedan slowed. Now, Charles said. Otis tapped a small dash-mounted button Marisol's team had installed 2 days earlier. 2 unmarked vehicles parked a quarter-mile up swung out and closed both lanes. The dark sedan braked hard. The car from the turnout pulled out and was boxed immediately by a third vehicle from a side lane. It happened fast and almost silently. No sirens yet, just plainclothes officers stepping out with the calm efficiency of people who had rehearsed this exact maneuver. Hands went up. Doors opened. The false driver was already out of his car, palms raised, before anyone asked him to be. Otis pulled to the shoulder and turned in his seat. It's over, he said. Not yet. Charles called Dwight. They've got the road. Tell Detective Renfro she can move on the house. He leaned his head back against the seat and listened to the wind moving over the old quarry water and let himself, for exactly 10 seconds, feel the whole weight of the morning at once. When Charles came home an hour later, 2 unmarked cars already sat near the front steps. Detective Yvonne Renfro, gray-haired, unhurried, the kind of patient face that had stopped being surprised by people decades ago, met him on the walk. She didn't run, Renfro said. Didn't call anyone. We found her in the garden room. She looked at us a long moment and said one thing, twice, like she needed to hear herself say it out loud. He told me he'd done this before. Charles felt no triumph, only a deep, ordinary exhaustion, the kind that comes at the end of a journey that should never have been necessary. They brought Renata out a few minutes later, walking between two officers, her chin level, her face neither defiant nor pleading. She stopped for half a second as she passed him on the walk. She didn't speak. She only looked at him, and in that look Charles saw, for one strange and final time, the woman who had stood beside him in a small church 22 years earlier and held his hand like she meant it. Then she walked on, and the car carrying her pulled away down the long drive, and Charles stood there a long time after the sound of the engine had gone. There's a particular kind of quiet that follows a moment like this one, not relief exactly, more like the silence after a storm finally passes through a house. If this story has held you this long, the channel grows every time someone decides to subscribe before the ending. We'll get there together. The case moved faster than anyone expected. Russell Cade, known on the terrace as Caleb Doyle, was charged within 48 hours with conspiracy, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and identity fraud. The deaths in Asheville and Tampa were reopened. New evidence surfaced in both within the month. The false driver took a deal and named everyone above him. The recording from a scuffed brass pocket recorder carried in a child's raincoat became the spine of the prosecution. Renata was charged as a co-conspirator. She didn't contest it. Her attorney told the court she wished to enter a plea, and the judge accepted it. Charles attended exactly one hearing. That was enough. In the weeks after, the house changed. Not the way a house changes after a death, but the way it changes after a long fever finally breaks. Charles moved his bedroom to a smaller room on the east side, where the morning light came in clean through real windows. He gave Otis a permanent salaried position with the company over Otis's 20 minutes of polite, stubborn protest. He hired a new estate manager, an older woman named Pauline who'd run a bed and breakfast in the Shenandoah Valley for 30 years, and slowly the house began, for the first time in a long while, to feel like somewhere people actually lived. Dell Estate. Charles asked if she wanted to, and she took 3 days to think it over before saying yes. She and Naomi moved into a larger cottage on the grounds, one with a working fireplace and a sunroom that caught the morning light better than the main house did. Naomi started at a new school that fall. Charles paid for it, and for the one after that, and made it clear, without ever quite saying, so that he intended to keep paying for whatever came next. He didn't call it charity. He called it an investment in someone who had already shown him exactly what kind of person she would grow into. In the spring, almost 7 months after the morning behind the holly hedge, Charles found her sitting on the low stone wall near the greenhouse, a notebook open on her knees, drawing the new birds that kept landing on Pauline's freshly planted dogwoods. Still drawing, he said, sitting beside her. My granddaddy used to draw birds on his church bulletins, Naomi said. My mom kept all of them. Then you come by it honestly, Charles said. They sat a while, watching the wind move through the dogwood branches. Mr. Whitfield, Naomi said eventually. You ever still get scared, thinking about that morning? He thought about it seriously, because she deserved a real answer and not a kind one. Sometimes, he said, not the way I felt it then, but some nights I think about how close I came to walking past you and not stopping. And what I feel isn't fear exactly. It's something more like gratitude that hasn't quite learned how to sit still yet. Naomi nodded slowly, the way children nod when they understand something fully without needing it explained. My mom says, she offered, that doing the right thing doesn't always make your life easier. But it lets you look at yourself in the mirror without flinching. Charles looked out across the lawn at the greenhouse glass, catching the early spring light. Your mother's right, he said. She's been right about almost everything. If this story moved you, that's the moment to hit like and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like this only find the people who need them when they're shared. And if you want the next one to find you too, you already know what to do. The most dangerous threats in our lives rarely arrive as strangers. They sit across the dinner table. They know our schedules and wear our trust like a coat that fits. And it's rarely the powerful who see it coming first. Sometimes it's a child in a yellow raincoat, with her grandfather's old recorder, brave enough to whisper the one sentence that changes everything. Pay attention to the small things. Never look away from what you already know is wrong. And never underestimate what one honest voice, however small, can stop before it happens.